The story of American independence begins long before the infamous shot heard round the world. The original 13 colonies were growing fast. Their economic capacity for capital was growing faster than Parliament could control. Parliament was, and still is, Britain's national legislative body. During the 1760s and 70s, Parliament began to place duties or taxes on many goods imported and exported by the American colonies. This turned into a way to fatten their own pockets, much to the dismay of colonial merchants who continued to demand representation in their own governing body. In 1773, Parliament placed a tax on tea, which had become a luxury to colonists. In December of that year, 4 ships sat waiting in Boston Harbor. The tea on these ships was being boycotted by the colonists in Massachusetts. But the British refused to return the product and intended to charge the duties anyways. Angry Bostonians boarded each ship and emptied over 300 crates of tea into the harbor. Parliament responded in 1774 with the Coercive Acts, which were renamed the Intolerable Acts by men and women in America who began to have second thoughts about their king and their rights as British citizens. King George III demanded the loyalty of the American colonists. The colonists, on the other hand, began to despise him, labeling him a tyrant and a despot. United under the oppression of King George, the First Continental Congress met in 1774. The first meeting was held in Philadelphia to express grievances against British colonial policy. Following the initial assembly, people began to think of themselves less as British citizens and more as Americans. The angry king sent 700 British regulars after a reported secret storage of arms and ammunition in the colony of Massachusetts. On April 19, 1775, they were met by the Minutemen, or citizen soldiers, of Lexington and Concord in defiance of an army on American soil. Fighting ensued, as no one knows who fired the first shot, but the shot heard round the world was the catalyst needed to bring the demand for independence to the Second Continental Congress, which was already in session in Philadelphia. New philosophic ideals began to spring up in a location where Parliament had controlled the flow of Enlightenment theory and literature. Benjamin Franklin was a man of experience. At 81 years of age, he had served overseas as a diplomat for several years, and was familiar with the libertarian thought that would influence much of the Second Continental Congress. Nationalism also sprang up in the colonies, whose citizens were unsure of whom or what they would turn to in the event that they did separate from their mother nation of Great Britain. John Adams was one such man who showed time and time again that national interest was first and foremost a concern to regard above all others. Representing Massachusetts, he was among the first to fight for independence in the realm of politics. Another famous founding father was Thomas Jefferson. He spoke out with his pen, and his foremost contribution was the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. Egalitarianism came overseas with the religious freedoms promised by the colonies. The thought that people should have equal political, social, and economic rights drove his political stance, as well as the articulation he exhibited with his pen. The Declaration of Independence is celebrated every 4th of July. But do you know that Congress actually voted to declare independence on the 2nd of July? Also, sources show that the signers didn't place their signatures on the document until August. This famous picture never actually took place. We know it as the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but in fact, the Congress had scattered as Philadelphia was threatened by the British army surrounding the area, and they all signed it at different times, whenever they could make the trip. Independence Hall in Philadelphia was the place where the Declaration was agreed upon, and also where it was initially announced to the public on July the 6th, 1776. The War for Independence didn't end until George Washington negotiated the surrender of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown 1781, 5 years after Continental Congress declared the independence of the United States of America. The Treaty of Paris wasn't signed granting independence at an international standpoint until 1783, 10 years after the Boston Tea Party and 8 years after the famous shot heard round the world.